Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Really excited to interview my friend Brandon Bateman here today. He's a pay-per-click expert. We're going to talk about digital marketing. Whether you're using it or not, you should be. There is a reason why all your customers are online right now, and there's a reason why you should be there too. So that's what we're going to talk about today is what's working now in digital marketing. Professional real estate investors know that it's not really about the real estate. In fact, real estate is just a vehicle to freedom. A group of over 100 of the nation's leading real estate investors from across the country meet several times a year at the Investor Fuel Real Estate Mastermind to share ideas on how to strengthen each other's businesses, but also to come together as friends and build more fulfilling lives for all of those around us. On today's show, we're going to continue our conversation of fueling our businesses and fueling our lives. I'm glad you're here. Hey, Brandon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Mike. Happy to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you here. And obviously we both run agencies. We do a lot of stuff with data and direct mail and things like that through Investor Machine. You have a pay-per-click business. And so I always love talking about lead gen because I know it's the lifeblood of everybody's business. And right now it's I guess more challenging than it has been in a long time, which creates a lot of opportunities as well. So glad to have you here, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited to be here. And about a lot of the stuff you're doing, Mike.
Yeah. Well, you too. You too. Yeah.
Thank you.
We could pat each other on the back for the next half hour. Let's do it. You ready?
Yeah.
But hey, I'm really excited too that you're in the Investor Fuel Mastermind. You serve a lot of our customers there, and one of the things that I really appreciate about you is that you add a lot of value. You're not just trying to push your product all the time. And obviously I've never seen you do that actually. So just sharing great value and giving a lot of value, and that tends to attract people that want to work with you. So looking forward to kind of learning what's working now inside of the digital marketing front. So before we jump in, tell us a little bit about your background before you were a marketer for real estate investors.
Yeah, it's a good question. So the funny thing is I actually started this company back when I was in college. So this whole idea of like people ask me all the time, like, were you an accountant before you did this, or like different stuff? And no, like I bagged groceries at a grocery store. It's not like I have like a gigantic career behind me. But the background is I started a company when I was in college, and my goal was just to use paid ads to help companies grow. I was super interested in marketing. I was super interested in data and just really hungry. And I remember I just kind of like emailed every company in the local town that I lived in that I could find online and just said, like, please let me do your marketing. I don't care if you even pay me or what you pay me or what you want me to do. I just want to do marketing. I want to learn. And I'm super hungry. And that eventually morphed into Bateman Collective, which is the company that we are today.
Yeah.
What introduced me to the real estate world is probably about 6 months after we started. I got in touch with someone in Utah named Mark Stubler. I don't know if anyone here knows him. If you know him, you probably know his partner, Cody Hoffine, who's the much louder side of the business, whereas Mark's kind of behind the scenes, doing operations and stuff. But Mark basically came to me. He runs a wholesaling operation in Utah. And he said, like, we're in this weird industry you've probably never heard of, where we do this like buying houses for cash and these weird things. And, all I could think is I think I've seen a couple of bandit signs or whatever the case is. And we've worked with a lot of agencies in here, and we heard that this digital marketing thing can work, but we just can't make it work in our market. Can you help us? We want to bring someone in from the outside. And that company kind of taught me everything that I know about real estate. And I kind of learned through all that. And that's kind of my introduction to real estate. We grew their marketing eventually to 1.4 million in wholesale assignment fees from digital marketing. And along that whole journey have been starting to work with a lot of other investors too. So that's
great. Once you kind of build that skill out, it's like, how do you help other people? How do you leverage that to work in, I guess, more markets, right? So that's great. So, a lot of folks that are, in my experience, real estate investors are typically, you kind of fall into two categories. This is going to be very broad, so I don't want to alienate anybody here. Too bad. But they're either super cheap and just try to do everything themselves, which I think is inherent from the fact that a lot of real estate investors had to be very scrappy when they first got started and just like had to, be the acquisitions person, had to like do everything themselves because they couldn't afford a team yet, right? Or they've scaled up enough to where they know that in order to have a life of any, you know, of any, like to get their life back, and to grow, they have to build out a team. They have to be willing to invest in marketing, outsource things to the right people, right? And so my goal is, and I kind of always think of like the Robert Kiyosaki cash flow quadrant. It's like the upper left is an employee, the lower left is the self-employed, right? They say they're a business owner, but the truth is the business owns them, right?
Yes.
Then there's the business owner that has probably still works in the business, but they have a team and they've got some systems and processes in place. And then in the lower right, there's the I box, which is they're an investor and they don't have to even get out of bed in the morning, but because their money is what's earning them more money, which is, you know, kind of where a lot of multifamily and some of the bigger multifamily guys are, is they invest, they're very passive, and the money makes them. But most people can't start there because they don't have, you have to make the money before their money can work for you, right? So my goal in a lot of things that I do is try to push people through that flow, right? Like when I used to do a lot of coaching, it's like, if you're an employee, let's get you to be self-employed and start something on your own. Then let's talk about how to scale to be more of a business owner and treat it like a business, right? And then let's kind of move into doing more passive stuff. And so I guess one of the things we'll talk about in this show is how do we move people out of being that self-employed box where they're doing everything themselves to scaling up through business and systems and processes and outsourcing some stuff so that they don't have to do it all. Because the truth is if you're stuck down there, um, you know, you're never going to get the freedoms that you wanted, which is why you started real estate investing, you know, 99% of the time, which is your time freedom and being able to scale up and make enough money to buy your time back. Right. So that's my little tirade there of why this stuff is important and why those that are listening right now should be listening to us. So let's talk about why, you know, specifically digital marketing is for those that aren't, you know, doing a lot of pay-per-click or even Facebook ads right now, why they should be doing more digital marketing, and maybe for some of those that are, why they should consider ramping that up if they can.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think maybe perhaps intentionally, it kind of relates to what you were talking about the different roles that you go through as a business, because different marketing channels have different benefits. I think, like, I guess one probably oversimplistic way to look at it could be to say that, like, every marketing channel is going to be somewhere on a scale. Way on one side of the scale, you have outbound marketing. Way on the other side of the scale, you might have inbound marketing. And as you move across this scale, you find different things, but you start to find that the inbound marketing makes more and more sense as that company's growing, as that company becomes more sophisticated, more well capitalized, and the owner is able to get more and more out of it. Like, the reason that outbound marketing is really great to start is because if you're looking at, like, how many dollars does it cost to get a new deal? Outbound marketing is usually cheaper than inbound marketing. Not always, but usually, like, that's the general trend. So you look at someone who's like just getting into real estate and they have $1,000, like, you know, maybe don't blow that on PPC. That's going to be
Right.
like, pick up the phone and start calling people, because, like, that's going to be like the cheapest, most effective way for you to spend that money getting a deal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think for a lot of people that first start off, and I've talked about this a lot over the years, is if you have more time than money, then you have to use more of your time to do things, which could be cold calling, texting, driving for dollars, door knocking, bandit signs, like all those things. But those things are not going to get you to freedom. Like, those might get you from the first step of the stairs to the second step, which is fine. Right. And so the goal is to get up to where your marketing is working and you don't have to think about it all that much. Right.
Yes.
Some scaled up lead gen.
Exactly. So, and, you know, to be clear, I think that all of those channels you mentioned, all the channels we could talk about here, like, every marketing channel has a place in its business, right? I'm not really usually an advocate of, like, ditch that marketing channel, start a different one. It's all about building upon, like, making things, like, basically combining all your channels together. But it's true that your focus shifts, right? Because at some point, even in your business, from a marketing perspective, you want your money to work for you instead of your time working for you. So that's where, if you make the shift from the outbound marketing to, like, say, in the middle between outbound and inbound, in that place, you're going to find, like, some marketing channels, for example, where you reach out to the seller in some automated fashion instead of like actually calling them or texting them or whatever the case is. Maybe it's through mail, or it's through a Facebook ad or something like that. And then they basically raise their hand and they say, yes, that's interesting to me. Yes, I want to do that. So that's like in the middle, right? It's going to be more
Yeah.
expensive than the outbound stuff usually, but it's going to be a higher quality lead when you get it. So there's something kind of in the middle, and then all the way on the far side, you would have like search engine marketing, where it's like people actively seeking you out, and those are generally the highest quality leads that you can have
Right.
in your business, and also usually the most expensive. So I think that whole path there is important, and you just have to think like, do you want your time to work for you or your money? And usually, what happens as companies scale is they want to start utilizing more and more channels that are either in the middle or the far end of that scale towards inbound. Just because if you look at like how many deals can we do as a team, it's more on that stuff. If you look at how many deals can I do with the amount of money I have, it's usually more with outbound.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no doubt. And I think investors need to understand that as you scale your business up, you hit this point of diminishing returns. Your advertising, your cost per deal is just going to generally get higher, but you're using less of your time, right? And so to scale, like to use an oversimplistic example, if you're primarily door knocking, like you can't do that 24 hours a day, or you can't do that 48 hours a day, right? Because there's not 48 hours in a day. So at some point, you just can't do that anymore. And of course, at probably every point, it's just not a fun thing to do. You're just doing it because you have to, right? So it's like you got to do
Yeah.
what you got to do to get to the point to where you can effectively buy your time back and use paid advertising to help generate leads, which is way more scalable. I mean, pay-per-click and direct mail, and those are obviously two of the more common paid advertising methods. You can't scale them endlessly either, but it's a whole lot easier to send you an email or to send us at Investor Machine an email and say, hey, I want to go from 5,000, I want to double my budget next month from wherever it's at, than it is to double your text message marketing or cold calling. That's a little more complicated because there's a lot more people involved in that type of campaign. Or if you're doing it yourself, like you probably can't just double the amount of time you spend on it of your own time, because if you're doing everything yourself, you probably don't have a whole lot of free time in the first place.
Yeah, agreed. So
Yeah.
so anyways, I think that's the clear value of inbound lead generation, whether that's direct mail, whether that's digital marketing, something like that. So for people that are listening to this that have kind of gotten to that point in their business where you can't afford those things, it is a really good next step. And most of the people listening probably are already doing some of that stuff.
Sure.
So I think a good way to understand like why digital marketing could be to understand even what other channels are available, right? Because a lot of people just also do think of digital marketing like that's a channel, but it's like the internet. The internet is full of all kinds of different things. You can find no less than a dozen channels that you can use. But what I think it really comes down to is three that are important for people that are really trying to find motivated sellers. That's PPC, which you mentioned a couple times here, Facebook ads, and SEO.
Yep.
And for most investors, some digital channel, like at least one of those three makes sense, and then for many of them, multiple of those can make sense. But it really is a natural progression. One that's commonly overlooked that I'm finding is Facebook ads. You just don't hear a lot of people talking about it, right? Like even like when we come into this, you're like, hey, PPC, and that's most people, because PPC is the one that you hear a lot about. Facebook ads is the one that is our highest ROI channel across clients, which is super interesting to me because it has a pretty bad reputation, because if you don't do it right, then it doesn't work. But like if you could do it right, it tends to work at a better ROI than PPC can. But it is more of an outbound channel than PPC. You're a little bit further on that scale. So it's a good for people usually just getting into digital marketing, I think Facebook ads is a good way to dip their toe in, because you get more dollars out for every dollar you put in, but you do have to deal with the lower lead quality.
Yeah. So on Facebook, so the idea with Facebook, and the challenge I think a lot of people have hit with Facebook is pay per click. So let's just kind of say Google, because that's most of it, but not all of it, but is behavioral, right? People are searching for keywords, like they're taking action. Facebook is people aren't really searching for anything other than just the distraction from whatever they should be doing, probably. And the hope is that they're going to see an ad that resonates with them, but it's not really as behavioral, as it's not based off of that user kind of taking action or searching for something that would indicate that they probably want what you have, right?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. The way that I've heard it described often is you kind of have two different ways that you can gather customers. It's either through going to be through demand generation or demand harvesting.
Yeah.
Demand generation would be the concept of what most wholesalers and flippers are doing. Like direct mail is a good example of this. Facebook ads is a good example of this. It's all just like going to people and saying, "Hey, do you want to sell your house?" But they weren't necessarily like looking for that solution. Versus demand harvesting is like that person searching on Google right now. They're going to find someone else on Google who's willing to buy their house, like almost guaranteed, unless you're in some weird market
Right.
that there are no wholesalers or flippers in. They're going to find someone, and that's demand that exists. You didn't generate that, and you just want to capture that demand instead of someone else. So
Right.
that's really the difference between those channels. And demand harvesting is just more of an inbound channel. So that's why people love, like, if you hear people that rave about PPC, the reason is those leads close quicker. They tend to be more motivated. All those things. The leads are amazing. It's just much more expensive than something
Yep.
like Facebook ads. So it's a really good channel at the right point that you're ready to scale that. Because if you look at how many people do you need to do a certain number of deals, I can almost guarantee you that number is lower with PPC than almost any other marketing channel,
Hmm.
just because of the quality of leads.
Right. Because the seller was searching for a solution.
Mm-hmm.
They're like ready to
Yep.
buy, right? And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't quite understand, which hopefully this is fairly, sometimes you hear something, you're like, oh, that makes total sense, is with SMS marketing, cold calling, things like that. You're calling a very broad list of people that weren't searching for you. You might have found them and they're somewhere in the sales cycle. Typically, they're way earlier in the sales cycle, right? They're like, well, yeah, I've thought about it, but they never took even the effort to do a search on Google yet, right? So you might, if you catch somebody that's interested, you're often catching them earlier in the sales cycle. And so, but when somebody, you know, is seeking you out or seeking the solution that you provide, they're already pretty far along in the decision to potentially sell, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's exactly what the difference is, right? So as with everything, you pay a premium, right? So PPC is more expensive, but the quality is really great. And then Facebook, you spend a little bit more time chasing down sellers, perhaps not as much as it would be with like a purely outbound channel, right?
Sure.
Because it is the thing with Facebook ads is it is every person that's a lead is still someone who typed in their information in the form and said, "I want a cash offer," and click the button to give that information to you so they could get their cash offer. So it is still an inbound marketing channel, but a little bit less motivation. Um,
Sure. Sure.
mhm.
Yeah. So for those of you that are listening right now that are thinking, sometimes people, I think sometimes investors look at their cost per lead and they might say, well, my cost per lead through pay per click or direct mail or something is twice as high as these other things. But if you look at the cost per acquisition, you probably start to see a shift. It's like, okay, the leads might cost you more, but the conversion is so much better typically that the cost per acquisition is really what you should be looking at, and potentially even the ROI on that deal. Like they could be more profitable deals if somebody, if they're more motivated, you know, in theory, academically, they might be willing to sell for less than those that you had to convince to talk to you in the first place, right?
And it's more than just theory. Like we
Well,
do
yeah, yeah,
track those metrics.
yeah,
Well, I'm sure you do too on your side with Investor Machine. But we find that these channels, on average, produce significantly larger deal sizes for our clients
yeah.
than their other channels. So it is interesting. You know, it's a different kind of conversation with the seller for sure.
Yeah. So with pay per click or with Facebook, you said, you know, it's often overlooked. Now, obviously, one of the things that's kind of gotten hot over the last, you know, year, 18 months is people that are virtually investing, and they're, the way that they've made Facebook work is they advertise across 30 states, right? And they're just like, I'll take a lead anywhere, I'll invest anywhere, which that's a legitimate model. There's a lot of challenges with that model too, especially on the disposition side. It's a little easier to generate leads and
Yeah.
acquire houses. The dispo side is the challenge in that model. And so some people have said, here's how I can get cheaper leads, is just, I don't care where they come from. But for my model and a lot of folks' models, they invest in, you know, one market or maybe a couple of markets, but they're heavy in those markets. So what's kind of working now with pay-per-click stuff? I mean, one thing that I'll throw out there, it's probably a softball, is more of retargeting ads that have visited your site and didn't fill out a form or did, right? But how about just
Mhm.
kind of cold traffic? Like what are some tips you can give on Facebook cold traffic for local markets?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Because a lot of people that you talk to that love PPC are going wide. What you do there is you trade one problem, the problem of acquisitions, for a different problem, the problem of dispositions.
Right.
And it's like, for some people it's a good trade, for others it's not a good trade. Like we have clients that are really successful in both types of models.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a different kind of advertising. What's been really successful for us is, I mean, it kind of depends on the channel. If we're talking about Facebook only right now, there's a lot of people who have tried Facebook. I can tell you it's pretty rare that I talk to an investor that tried Facebook and just says, I didn't get any leads. Right. Usually it's, I got so many leads and they were so bad that I don't know how anybody makes this work. Right. That's usually the problem with Facebook. So usually the way that we do Facebook ads targets a much higher cost per lead than the average Facebook ad, and also targets a much higher quality per lead than the different Facebook ad. And when we've done tests of our strategies versus different types of strategies, what we found is our clients get more of a return off of less leads, which even if you could generate the same return off of less leads, I think that's a win. But really, with Facebook, the reason a lot of people are getting stuck on it is because they think of Facebook like they think of their other marketing channels.
Right.
But it's the internet. It works so differently. Even like all this stuff, like I love what you guys are doing with Investor Machine. You guys are taking data to a whole different level compared to what other companies are doing. Those same principles that you're using would make you fall flat on your face on Facebook ads. But so many investors are taking those same principles and they're pulling them in. The best success that we've had with Facebook ads is leveraging Facebook's technology the best that we can. Facebook is largely machine learning driven. So to give you an example, if I, for example, was to advertise, I mean, this is a weird example, like let's just say cat food, right, on Facebook ads. A lot of people would say you want to target people who have cats, right? That's a really simple thing. What you could do with Facebook ads is you could target everybody. And what you would find is when you started looking at who's seeing your ads a few weeks later, it would only be people who have cats, because Facebook would start to learn that the only people who buy this share these common attributes. And the exact same thing happens with the targeting when it's to motivated sellers. A lot of people want to narrow their audience and say only reach the people that we want to reach. Really, typically the way that it works best is we target broad audiences, but we tell Facebook very clearly what our goals are, and we communicate to Facebook very clearly when those goals are met. So Facebook learns over time which people are more likely to accomplish our goal than other people. So in a sense, targeting through Facebook ads doesn't happen through targeting, but instead through optimization. And that's significantly more powerful than any other data that we could feed into Facebook. So we found that by doing that, like by creating barriers to someone filling out a lead form, and then using those leads that went through more friction in order to tell Facebook, hey, this was good, I want more of this stuff, we have been able to increase lead quality significantly. And also just understanding that machine learning is completely random and it goes all kinds of different directions. So you have to understand when it's not working. Facebook is so far from a set it and forget it type channel. At least on our side, right? On your side, you can set us and forget us. But it's about like understanding when that machine learning is like messing up and being able to fix and intervene so that you get back to the right sellers. And that's where most people are going wrong. If they did those two things right, they would be able to get a much higher quality lead from Facebook.
Yeah. And I think that back to the investors being cheap, there's a lot of folks with, I mean, we see it with, obviously most people that send direct mail, most I'll say, because we're probably the largest done for you lead generation system, certainly with direct mail in the country at this point. We've grown pretty fast with Investor Machine, but I know just from being in the business for 13 years, there's a lot of people that were like, well, what you see it all the time. What's your favorite list? What's your best list to send to? And people will say, oh, probate or something simple. It's like, but that's such a simplified version. And then those are such small lists ultimately in the grand scheme of things. So people will go get, and they'll say, I got the list, as if it's this static thing. And they're like, oh, I pulled the list. And then they don't pull it again forever. Like we pull it every day. We pull that stuff every day. Right. And so, but then people don't clean up their list. So they don't take off the solds. They don't take off. Sometimes they don't take off the people that asked to be taken off. They don't take off the undeliverables because those are sitting in a box in the corner. And so, but in the spirit of being cheap, they just keep doing it over and over again when they're not really looking at the greatest expense is the opportunity cost lost of not doing it right. And I know that's the same with pay-per-click with digital marketing. People will be like, oh, I can just get in and figure this out. Or my buddy gave me a bunch of keywords that I could upload and put it in there. And it's like so much more than that. I just don't think that real estate investors, the ones that are thriving right now, have that mindset. And if you're listening to this right now and you're saying, oh crap, they're talking about me. We are, right? At the end of the day, what does it cost you to do this wrong? Like, what is it costing you? You can't see it on your P&L, but it's a real expense, and it's probably your biggest expense. And so,
So
hopefully
true.
try to advise people here to, at the end of the day, I'm a champion for real estate investors. I want them to thrive and have amazing lives and do all the things that they want to do. But I see so many struggle, and it's because they just, honestly, they just do a bunch of half-ass stuff. So,
Hmm. And what a lot of people don't get, um, well, I mean, we could talk about how people go wrong with this all the time, but the what a lot of people don't get is that it's a data game primarily over anything else.
yeah,
Like with your direct mail and stuff, sometimes it's not about you necessarily taking forever to press the button. It's about knowing which button to press.
yeah,
And that takes experience, that takes expertise, that takes a lot of data from a lot of other places that tells you which kind of things are working better, allows you to train whatever types of algorithms you're using to do better. So that's the tough thing. It's like, Mike, you're not a digital marketing expert, but I have a firm belief. I believe if we took all of the data that we have as a company and I delivered that to you, and then we stripped me of all the data that we have, and I just went out on my own, kind of like you are now in the digital marketing space. I believe that you, if you put your mind to it, and me, if I put my mind to it, you would outperform my campaigns because you have the data. The data is so important.
right,
And that's what a lot of people don't fully understand. You know, like I talked to someone else the other day that instead of hiring us, wanted to hire like 4 in-house people to manage these campaigns. He's like, well, I figured if we get like, 40 hours a week times 4 people, like that'll work better. But it's not a game of hours. It's a game of
right,
knowing which button to press more so than just sitting there pressing the button all day, if that makes sense. And
sure.
the data is so important.
Yeah. So maybe you could give some guidance to those that are out there. Let's kind of talk to two different people. Let's say that there's the investor that just doesn't have, enough of a budget yet to pay an agency because there's a management fee, right? That's always one of the issues of, like you said, if your marketing budget is $1,000 a month, I mean, first off, God help you, because that's not much this day and age, right? And so I'm not, trying to say that folks that are just getting started out there, if you're listening to this, there's not a way to get started, but it's probably not digital marketing. It's probably not direct mail. It's more hustle, like save your money and, cold call or text message market or whatever you got to do to get going. But know that paid advertising ultimately is how you scale. Well, let's talk to that person that has low budget. Where do they get started with digital advertising as they start to raise their budget up? And then we'll kind of ask the same question of those that have a decent budget but aren't seeing the returns they want. Like, what are some ways they can maybe optimize, right? So let's start with kind of the low budget person first. How do they even get started in digital marketing? We really haven't talked much about SEO. Maybe it's SEO, which is a lower hurdle.
Yeah.
But I don't want to take any words out of your mouth, but maybe share your thoughts.
Yeah, I can share some examples of what someone could do, and what I have seen people do. Right. So if you're going to come in with a really small budget, you may want to strongly consider just focusing that time and those efforts on other channels first, because digital marketing is a more expensive game. Right. If you're going to go the digital marketing route, this whole concept of small budget is sort of, like what is small, what isn't small. Like I can tell you what we
Sure.
usually tell people, when it comes to like the paid ad side. If you don't have 3 grand a month and you're not able to sustain it for 6 months, maybe do something else first until you can be at that point. Then it's time to start experimenting with digital marketing. And usually, like at that lower budget range, Facebook ads is usually the best first channel because it'll generate a lot of leads for the amount of budget. If you do it right, it'll be the right quality. It'll get you the most dollars out for every dollar in on an immediate level, instead of like SEO, which probably would beat Facebook ads from an ROI standpoint. It just would take a year to get there, or whatever the case is. The other thing that I have seen people do, including people in Investor Fuel, which obviously we're both a part of, I'm a part of, you own, is SEO. You can kind of hustle your way through SEO if you want to. I think expertise is helpful, but you can find lots of information online. I think if you are going to DIY a channel, SEO is the one to DIY. And the reason is it is more of a game of pressing the button a lot of times than knowing which button to press. And like on PPC, Facebook ads, if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to blow your money like crazy. Whereas SEO, you can only really blow your time, right? You can go out trying to build your own links. You can write your own blog posts, content, get it all out. Like you can do all those things. Most people, by the time they really get into that, they're like, okay, I should just hire someone to do this. Like, they don't think it's worth their time.
Yeah.
But that's probably my like if you're looking for the DIY channel, SEO is, I think, the one that's most possible. But at some point, you probably will want to outsource that, just because at some point you'll look at what it costs to get it done by an agency and how much time you spend on it, and you'll realize there's like, unless you like want to build your own SEO agency and like build all the processes and hire like a army of VAs to do your SEO, it's a hard path, you know. But it can get you started, right? If you're willing to hustle, you can get there.
Sure. Awesome. And then let's talk about the person that's kind of scaling up. They're in the scale up stage. Like they have a decent budget, they're spending money. They might already be online, but they are having a hard time kind of scaling it from where they're at. Maybe they're doing it themselves and they should outsource it. Maybe talk to that person a little bit and just say, what are some of the common things you've seen that people are kind of either doing wrong or not doing right, at least that you know, if tweaked, they could start to scale and see better results from.
Yeah, excellent question. I mean, and the thing is, it could be a variety of different issues. What you really need is to be able to diagnose what that issue is. So the number one problem that I see with this is these people are basically saying like, hey, money's going out, I'm not getting money back in, but they don't know the first thing about trying to figure out why that's the case, right? Because you're just like, oh, I hired an agency, I give them my money, we didn't get the money back. You know, what do we do? All right. So the important thing is to understand what kind of issues there could be and understand how to detect which kinds of issues there are. Like you need to basically consult with someone who understands it. You should be buying these types of clicks. And when you do, you should have about this kind of conversion rate on your website. And when you do, about this percentage of the leads should be people that are sellers that you can get on the phone. And if you do get that, then a normal close rate would be this. And for your market, a normal assignment would be that. And a lot of people don't really know how to diagnose that, but then you can find, you know, could it be an acquisitions issue? I can tell you it's really common for people coming from channels like cold call and text into digital marketing to fail from an acquisition standpoint. I had a client recently in Atlanta that had like a pretty solid business. They were doing multiple six figures every month off of cold call in the business. And we added digital marketing, Facebook ads for 4 months. They got 0 deals. And
wow,
they were like, what the heck, Brandon? I thought you said this works. And I was saying like, look, the marketing looks like it's working fine. I'll give you this analysis, like what kinds are happening, what kind of people are seeing the ads, what kind of leads are we getting? All that stuff looked fine. But there's some type of a disconnect. We found out that their team was just trained on the wrong kind of leads and they didn't understand how these leads were different, right? They were looking through the digital leads where you kind of have to assume that there's motivation because they reached out asking for a cash offer, and they were treating them like they were a cold call lead where unless the price is right, we're not going to go out, right? So in the past 4 months, after they retrained their team, they had 17 deals from Facebook ads, averaging over $30,000 each. A complete 180-degree turn just from like they're taking acquisitions people that know how to close deals, but didn't know how to close Facebook ads deals. So you have to make sure that you have that process in mind. And then of course it could be the marketing that's the problem too. But what people think is they think like, I'm going to test this company versus that company versus this other company and just keep on trying companies. What you want to try is strategies, because what people end up doing is they hire 4 different companies to do the same thing, hoping that they're going to get different results because they don't really understand what the companies are doing in the first place. Yeah. So if anybody's in that kind of situation, I'm more than happy to talk with you, kind of go through your metrics and tell you where the metrics are varying from benchmarks. Because if you can find where the problem is and you can fix it, that's going to be a lot more effective than just giving up or just trying again, but not even understanding what you're doing different than the first time.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Brandon, good stuff. So a couple of things that you've been a part of the Investor Fuel. You know, one of the things that I think is great about digital marketing is that you can, especially as an agency, right? You can compare how people are performing. You can compare those campaigns. And like you said, even as an agency, your data across multiple customers helps all those customers because you're learning and you can tweak everybody's campaign to kind of follow that. So along those lines, being part of a mastermind like Investor Fuel, you can get in a room and compare what's working and what's not working and learn and grow faster than anybody could ever do on their own, which you've been a part of Investor Fuel for, I guess, about 6 months or so now, roughly. Would you mind just kind of sharing your thoughts on being a part of Investor Fuel so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think just what you kind of shared a little bit there was just even the value of like a mastermind. I'd say if you're a real estate investor and you're not part of some type of group of people that you can be accountable to and that have quality information, people whose businesses reflect the kind of business that you want to create, if you're not putting yourselves in those rooms, you're just not going to grow the way that you could grow. I think that is such an incredible part of the business. Then the question would be, why Investor Fuel? I think Investor Fuel has like a good group of caring people. I've really like from day one that I came there, I felt like even as a vendor, which is a little bit of a different scenario because everybody knows that you're there to sell them anyways. The people are nice and the people are helpful, and I see tons of collaboration there, and I see people growing their businesses in ways that they wouldn't otherwise. So I think, I love the group, love what you guys are doing there, and I think among masterminds, I love what you guys are doing from a community standpoint and how much fun you guys are having at the events. I think that's like some of the core benefits of Investor Fuel. And even just like masterminds, like if you're listening to this and you're not part of a mastermind, then like, what are you doing? Because that is going to be like, I can almost guarantee tenfold whatever money you invest into a mastermind is going to come back to you. Just because of the kind of model that it provides. You don't know what you don't know until you're with a group of people that can show you what you can become. And that is so important.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for that, Brandon. So if folks wanted to learn more about you, I know you actually take a lot of time to just share people that aren't even clients yet, like, what's working and what's not working, and maybe kind of give them assessments on what they're doing and how they can improve it, which is pretty amazing that you take the time to do that. But if folks wanted to connect with you or learn more about some of the digital marketing services you offer, where do they go?
Yeah, so a good place would be to go to batemancollective.com/fuel. That's just our link for Investor Fuel. So that's BATEMAN collective.com/fuel. And there you can schedule right onto my calendar. You can just mention in the notes, like, hey, I want to take a look at my digital marketing campaign or whatever the case is. And I'm an open book. If you could, I don't know how you guys, you might find someone, if you ask around, that we've done this kind of analysis for. I know we've certainly done it for a lot of Investor Fuel members, or even if we don't end up working together, it opens their eyes to things that they never realized about their digital marketing campaigns. Yeah. Saves them a bunch of money in the future.
Yeah, awesome. Good stuff. Well, we'll add a link down below for this, for those of you that weren't able to write that down. We'll put a link in the show notes. So awesome, Randall. Hey, thanks so much for sharing some advice with us today and some guidance. And for those of you that are listening, hopefully you got some good value here, and hopefully at a minimum, just a lesson on the importance of, if you're not really good at this stuff, the way to separate yourselves from the pack is to work with somebody that can do it for you. Like, you don't have to be a jack of all trades. You don't have to do everything yourself, right? And if you're trying to do everything yourself early on, we get it. There's some hustle that has to happen before you get to that point, but you're never going to get the freedom that you want, and you're never going to be operating at a high level if you're trying to do everything yourself. There's just no way you could be good at all those things. So we encourage you to reach out to other service providers that can help you, because it's a hard skill to ever be as good as somebody that does it professionally in-house. I mean, quite frankly, that's just kind of where we're at in the industry, and it's only going to lean more and more in that direction. So appreciate you guys a ton. Hopefully you got some good value. If you haven't yet checked out Investor Fuel, you can go to investorfuel.com to learn more. Schedule a call with us if you want to talk about it. We have an amazing group, and it just gets better each and every month. So appreciate you a bunch. We'll see you on the next show. Are you an active real estate investor? If so, and you want to latch on to the power of surrounding yourself with over 100 of the nation's leading real estate investors, all committed to building stronger businesses and living richer, fuller lives, you should jump on a call with us to learn more about Investor Fuel. Simply visit investorfuel.com to get started.